147 police officers died in the US in 2024. Usually the killers are arrested and spend life in prison or sometimes killed at the scene. This video tells the story of a woman who not only was arrested for killing a police officer, but walked away without spending a single day behind bars. It was a cold winter morning on January 29, 2022 at 6:03 a.m. Karen Reed found Boston police officer John O'Keefe found unconscious on the front lawn of fellow police officer Brian Albert home located at 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. Karen Reed was, at the time, the girlfriend of John O'Keefe. She was accompanied by her friends Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts. The women were searching for him after he failed to return home that morning. John had suffered multiple impact injuries to the head, and after being taken to Good Samaritan Medical Center in Brockton, Massachusetts, where he was declared dead at 7:59 a.m. An autopsy had confirmed the cause of death 2 days after the body was discovered. The medical examiner, Dr. Irene Scorti-Bello, noted a laceration to the back of his head, skull fractures, a cut above his right eye, abrasions on his nose and arm, 2 black eyes, and a scratch on his right knee. The arm abrasions were described as superficial abrasions and punctures on his right arm, from the middle of the forearm to just below the shoulder. The prosecutor and detectives in charge of the case determined that the abrasions were the result of impact from Reed's car's taillight that had shattered while she was attempting to run John O'Keefe over. The scenario of the car impact was argued by experts who alleged the scratches, punctures, and abrasions were consistent with bite marks and scratches caused by a dog and not a broken taillight. The cause of death was unable to be confirmed by the medical examiner, as they could not find sufficient evidence to support the conclusion that O'Keefe was killed by a vehicle. This was despite the Boston Police Department allegedly trying to pressure and influence the medical examiner to support the vehicle impact theory. Although there was no evidence linking Reed to the death of boyfriend John O'Keefe, Reed was arrested on February 1, 2022. She was charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death. Reed hired Boston criminal defense attorney David Yannetti was as her counsel. On June 9th of the same year, with no new records, statements, or evidence, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office announced that a grand jury indicted Reed on an additional charge of second-degree murder. The upgraded charges resulted in Reed's case being moved from Stoughton District Court to Norfolk County Superior Court, where it was assigned to Judge Beverly Canone. Do you think any of this would have occurred if a police officer wasn't killed and the police department wasn't implicated in the matter? Let me know in the comments. Reed was first tried on April 22, 2024. Her legal team grew from just David Yannetti. She added Los Angeles-based attorneys Elizabeth Little and Alan Jackson. The trial resulted in a hung jury on July 1, 2024, with members of the jury being unable to agree whether Reed was innocent or guilty. A second trial for Reed began on April 1, 2025. Reed's case had gathered support and her legal team increased again, adding 2 further defense lawyers, Robert Alessi and Victoria George. On June 18th, after a 6-week trial and a 21-hour deliberation by the jury, Reed was found not guilty on all 3 of the major charges. She was found guilty of operating a vehicle under the influence, receiving the standard sentence of 1 year of probation. The case has attracted international attention due to allegations of police corruption and misconduct in the town of Canton. Many investigative journalists began researching events surrounding the people involved and uncovered a suspicious death of a pregnant woman named Sandra Birchmore in her Canton apartment, which drew many parallels to the death of John O'Keefe and involved many of the same law enforcement personnel. The victim, John J. O'Keefe III, nicknamed JJ or Johnny, was born December 8, 1975. He was raised in Braintree, Massachusetts. He graduated from Braintree High School and then went on to study a bachelor's degree of criminal justice at Northeastern University, before continuing his studies at the University of Massachusetts Lowell and earning a master's degree. O'Keefe was a guardian of his niece and nephew after the death of their parents in 2013 and 2014. John was a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department and on paper was a great man. In reality, perhaps there was something more sinister going on relating to his line of work and the people he was associating with. Karen A. Reed was born February 26, 1980, grew up in Taunton, Massachusetts and Blacksburg, Virginia. She graduated from Coyle and Cassidy, a private Catholic school in Taunton, and attended Bentley University, where she obtained both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in finance. She had been a financial analyst at Fidelity Investments since 2007 and was an adjunct professor at Bentley University until her arrest in February 2022. Reed was living in Mansfield at the time of O'Keefe's death. O'Keefe and Reed met in 2004 and dated briefly. They rekindled their relationship in 2020 after connecting over Facebook during the COVID-19 pandemic. Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael D. Proctor of the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit was appointed the lead investigator for the case. A 12-year veteran of the state police, Proctor was later fired on March 19, 2025, after revelations of his inappropriate actions in the investigation of O'Keefe's death, including having sent derogatory, defamatory, disparaging, and/or otherwise inappropriate text message about a suspect in that investigation to other individuals, and provided sensitive and/or potential investigative steps in the investigation to non-law enforcement personnel. 16 hours into the investigation, and before O'Keefe's autopsy had been performed, Proctor openly discussed the case in a group text with his high school friends. Proctor wrote that they won't be able to prove Reed hit O'Keefe with her car, and that all the powers that be want answers ASAP. He also referred to her as a whack job, saying zero chance she skates. On February 2nd, 2022, within hours of Reed's arraignment, her attorney, David Yannetti, received an anonymous phone call from later-to-be-identified private investigator Stephen Scanlon, man who claimed to have a background in Boston law enforcement. The man alleged that Brian Albert and his nephew Colin Albert had beaten O'Keefe to death inside 34 Fairview. Afterwards, Brian Albert and an unnamed federal agent, now known to be ATF agent Brian Higgins, dragged O'Keefe's body onto the lawn. Stephen Scanlon gave a statement to authorities confirming that he sent the tip to Yannetti. In April 2023, Reed's attorneys presented a theory that implicated Brian Albert, who owned the home outside of which O'Keefe was found dead, and his sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, who had been drinking with Reed and O'Keefe on January 28th and helped Reed find O'Keefe's body the morning of January 29th. Evidence showed that Brian Albert sold his house and got rid of his dog after the incident, and the defense team argued that Jennifer McCabe made a Google search for "How Long to Die in Cold" at 2:27 a.m., though prosecutors argued that was the time the tab used in the search was opened in the browser and not the time the search was actually made. In January 2024, letters between the General Counsel for the Department of Justice and Norfolk District Attorney Michael W. Morrissey were released, confirming a federal investigation was mounted into the Norfolk District Attorney's office. On February 2, 2022, Reed was arraigned in Stoughton District Court on charges of manslaughter, leaving the scene of an accident, and motor vehicle homicide. She pleaded not guilty and was released on $80,000 bail. In June 2022, a Norfolk County grand jury indicted Reed for second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter, and leaving the scene of a collision. On March 12, 2024, Reed's attorneys filed a motion to dismiss the case due to alleged conflicts of interest and federal crash reconstruction experts determining that O'Keefe's injuries were inconsistent with the damage to Reed's car. However, the judge denied the motion on March 26 due to extensive evidence supporting the indictments. Reed's first trial started on April 16, 2024. The prosecutors in the case previously asked the judge to block Reed's lawyers from arguing that others are to blame for O'Keefe's death, also known as third-party culprit defense. The judge instead offered the defense a chance to develop their argument through relevant, competent, admissible evidence, but still barred them from using the third-party culprit defense during opening statements. On April 28, the prosecutors and the defense presented opening statements. The prosecution was led by Adam Lally and Laura McLaughlin. Reed was represented by criminal defense attorneys David R. Yannetti, Alan Jackson, and Elizabeth Little. The prosecution argued that Karen A. Reed intentionally ran O'Keefe over with her SUV after a night of heavy drinking on January 29, 2022. They claimed that pieces of Reed's broken taillight were found at the scene, alleging her vehicle was involved in the incident. A hair consistent with O'Keefe's was found on Reed's car, which the prosecution maintained indicated contact from an impact by her car on O'Keefe. Stories of arguments and tension between the couple were heard from several witnesses, including testimony of an argument during the couple's trip to Aruba in December 2021, which the prosecution put forward as evidence of an allegedly troubled relationship. Reed's angry texts and voicemails on the night of January 29th were introduced into evidence as support for this. The prosecution argued Reed's behavior on the morning O'Keefe's body was found did not match that of someone unaware of the incident. The defense argued that Reed was being framed as part of a law enforcement cover-up to protect the real perpetrators, suggesting that O'Keefe was beaten inside the house of another Boston police officer, Brian Albert, and then left outside to die in the snow, and that the close relationships between Trooper Michael Proctor and the Albert family created a conflict of interest and compromised the investigation. Proctor admitted to not initially disclosing his personal relationship with certain witnesses in the case. The defense also showed to the jury the lack of integrity in the investigation, such as the use of solo cups and stop-and-shop grocery bags during evidence collection, and the inappropriate text messages about Reed between Proctor and his co-workers, friends, and family, including Proctor's assessment of Reed's attractiveness and his hope that she would kill herself. The defense showed Reed's taillight intact after midnight on January 29th, in contrast to the evidence of a shattered taillight, accusing the investigators of planting evidence, and also pointed to the mirrored Sallyport video of Reed's SUV at the Canton Police Department. The defense argued that the injuries on O'Keefe's body were not consistent with a car collision, which was confirmed by a number of experts, including 2 accident reconstruction experts obtained by the FBI and the medical examiner employed by the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth rested their case on June 21, 2024, after 8 weeks of testimony from 68 witnesses. The defense completed its list of witnesses and rested their case on June 24th. Closing arguments were delivered on June 25th, and jury deliberations started the same day. On July 1st, after 25 hours of deliberation, the jury was unable to come to a unanimous decision, citing fundamental differences in their beliefs. Judge Canone was forced to declare a mistrial. Reed's attorneys filed a motion to dismiss 2 of the charges, second-degree murder and leaving the scene of an accident, saying that several jurors reached out after the mistrial and indicated that the jury found Reed not guilty on both of these charges. Martin G. Weinberg, a new attorney for the defense, argued for dismissal of the charges. On August 23rd, Canone denied the motion to dismiss the charges. Reed's attorneys filed an appeal to Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court and also requested that the federal court drop 2 of the charges. Both requests were denied. Karen Reed's second trial began on April 1, 2025, with Special Deputy District Attorney Hank Brennan, recognized for defending Whitey Bulger, leading the prosecution. New York-based attorney Robert Alessi and Victoria Brophy George were added to Reed's defense team. On the first day of trial, Reed filed an emergency request to the U.S. Supreme Court to delay proceedings and dismiss 2 charges on double jeopardy grounds. Both requests were denied. She faced 3 major charges: second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of a collision resulting in death. The prosecution presented evidence related to Reed's blood alcohol level, digital activity timelines, and forensic analysis of damage to her vehicle. Testimony included expert opinions on the alignment of injuries to O'Keefe with the alleged reverse impact from Reed's SUV. The prosecution rested its case on May 29, 2025. The defense opened with testimony challenging the cause of O'Keefe's injuries, suggesting alternative explanations including a potential dog bite. Disputes arose over late-stage questioning about DNA evidence, prompting a mistrial motion from the defense, which was denied. Additional defense testimony addressed the condition of Reed's taillight and whether it had been altered after the incident. On June 11, 2025, the defense rested its case. Jury deliberations began 2 days later. On June 18th, Reed was found not guilty on the 3 major charges. The jury did find her guilty of the lesser charge of operating under the influence. For this, she received a year's probation, which would require Reed's participation on the Commonwealth's 24D program. In addition to probation, she will receive outpatient treatment and loss of license, as standard for a first-time offense. On August 23, 2024, the O'Keefe family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Reed and 2 bars in Canton, accusing Reed of hitting and killing O'Keefe and the bars of overserving her. A stay of proceedings was ordered by Judge William White until the criminal case was resolved to protect Reed's Fifth Amendment rights. The case has caused divisions in Canton, as town residents have debated whether O'Keefe was killed by Reed or whether Reed was framed by the police. Social tensions and old family feuds have reportedly been inflamed by the case. During the first trial, several Canton residents who are Reed supporters also spoke at Canton Select Board meetings, confronting Chris Albert and calling for accountability. 3 of them said their lawns were later vandalized with bleach balloons. In August 2023, a Massachusetts citizen ballot initiative was proposed to add recall elections to the Massachusetts Constitution in response to Norfolk County District Attorney Michael W. Morrissey's perceived corruption in the case. In November 2023, Canton held a special town meeting where residents voted in favor, 903 to 800, of an independent audit of the Canton Police Department due to the ongoing investigation of this case. The audit concluded in 2025 ahead of the second trial and found that first responding officers did not photograph O'Keefe at the location where he was found before he was moved to the ambulance. Interviews of critical witnesses were not conducted at the Canton Police Department on the day after O'Keefe was transported to the hospital, and witness interviews were not recorded. Massachusetts State Police and Canton Police also did not maintain a police presence at 34 Fairview Road, pending the secondary search conducted by State Police crime scene units, and Canton Police did not turn over video footage maintained on their computer systems of Reed's SUV while it was housed at the Canton Police Department from January 29 through February 2, 2022, to lead investigators. The case created high tensions in the Canton area, sparking multiple protests. In early April 2024, ahead of the first trial, the prosecutors filed a motion requesting a buffer zone to keep protesters back at least 500 feet from the courthouse. Canton later ordered a 200-foot buffer zone after the ACLU filed a memorandum opposing the prosecution's request, citing freedom of speech, and urged the court to consider more narrowly tailored restrictions. Ahead of the second trial, Reed's supporters filed a federal lawsuit against Canton on the grounds of free speech. A federal judge ruled the buffer zone does not violate protesters' First Amendment free speech rights. During the first trial, the judge approved the prosecution's request to prohibit anyone inside the courtroom from wearing any attire related to the case, and also prohibit law enforcement officers, whether they be testifying or attending the trial, from wearing their uniforms. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse wearing pink on every court day, cheering for Reed and taking photos with her and her lawyers. After the first trial, Proctor was relieved of duty and formally transferred out of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, State Police Detectives Unit, and he was suspended without pay on July 8. In March 2025, he was fired by Massachusetts State Police after a state police trial board determined that he sent inappropriate text messages about a suspect and provided sensitive and/or potential investigative steps in the investigation to non-law enforcement personnel. He was also found guilty of unsatisfactory performance and violating policy on alcoholic beverages. On July 10, 2024, Canton Police placed Detective Kevin Albert on leave based on testimony from the trial. That September, Canton Police announced he would face a 3-day suspension without pay. Due to the inappropriate and corrupt actions of members of law enforcement involved in the case, it has forced other cases to be reviewed based on potential biased and false findings, resulting in potentially innocent people being put behind bars. In February 2021, Sandra Birchmore, a 23-year-old woman from Stoughton, was found dead in her Canton apartment. In both the Birchmore and O'Keefe investigations, federal intervention led to different conclusions than the initial investigations by local police. Her death was initially ruled a suicide, but initial findings by local authorities were contradicted by federal investigators, who alleged that foul play was involved. Detective Matthew Farwell of the Stoughton Police Department allegedly groomed Birchmore, initiating a sexual relationship with her when she was 15 years old. She became pregnant in 2020. Farwell was unhappy and accused Birchmore of entrapping him by intentionally getting pregnant. Birchmore insisted upon naming the married Farwell as the father. Both Birchmore and Farwell believed the latter to be the father of the unborn child, although in 2025 it was revealed that he was in fact not the father. Farwell is accused of strangling Birchmore and staging her death as a suicide. Reed's attorneys have sought police documents related to the Birchmore case, and officers involved in both cases, including Norfolk attorney Michael Morrissey, Canton Police Sergeant Michael Lank, Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert, Massachusetts State Police Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, and Lieutenant John Fanning. Accused cop killer Karen Reed was found not guilty of murdering her boyfriend John O'Keefe. Corrupt law enforcement attempts to frame her were eventually realized, and she was free to move on with her life. What actually happened on the night of O'Keefe's death is still up for debate. No one has been charged with the murder, and we may never know the whole truth. Will the Canton Police Department change their ways after the spotlight has been placed on them over this case? Will they continue to act in an inappropriate manner, unbecoming of a police officer? Will we see more cases come to light, highlighting corruption and false arrests of innocent people? Only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.